Okay, good morning. My name is Helen Christians, and I will be your MC today for the Humanists of Greater Portland. It's all wonderful to see. See you all. We've got lots of people here today, and that is good. I do want to get you oriented to this presentation, to the Zoom presentation, and you'll notice that you'll see a microphone, and there should be a red line right now through your microphone. That means you're muted, so we can't hear you. And we're going to keep the microphones muted during the presentation, but when it's time for questions or interaction, you'll be able to just click on that mute button, and that will be able to hear you. So if during the presentation you do click on that button, we will be able to hear you. Ingrid is the host of this meeting, and she will have control of that, of her ability to mute and unmute folks. You'll also see near the image of the microphone a video recorder, and that will allow you to be seen or not seen. If you put a red click on the video recorder, you'll get a red line through the video recorder, and then we'll just see your name on the screen and not your picture. But I hope it's fun to see people, so I hope you stay showing your face. You also have a choice of how you want to view the presentation. You can do a speaker view, which will be a big screen of the speaker and some tiny screens of a few of the folks that are watching. Or you can do a gallery view, which will be multiple little, kind of like the Brady Bunch, lots of little screens. And now at the end of the program, we will be, after the speaker, there'll be time for questions, and I'll explain how to do that as we get finished with the presentation. And we'll also be sticking around just for some time to talk with each other. So I encourage you you can log off, of course, right at the end of the program, but I'd encourage everybody to stay on, and we'll have a little time to talk. You are at the meeting for the Humanists of Greater Portland, and I want to just briefly remind you of what humanism is. It's a progressive philosophy that, without supernaturalism, advocates living an ethical life based on science, reason, and free inquiry. Humanists act with social compassion to enhance the well-being and value of all people for the betterment of society. Today is Mother's Day, and that's one thing we all have in common. We're two things. We're all living with COVID-19, and we all had mothers. So I want to recognize Mother's Day, and that there's certainly all the mothers that are here at this gathering today, and also honor all the women who gave birth to this group of really wonderful humanists. And I hope your mother is still with you, but if she's not, I recognize her value in your life. Dorothy Canfield Fisher, who introduced the Montessori method to the United States in the early 1900s, wrote, and I quote, "Mother is a verb. It is something you do, not just who you are. And during this time of worldwide pandemic, it's my hope that we all behave and are treated with the kindness and patience and selflessness of a good mother." Bernd will be doing our reading this morning, and I welcome Bernd to unmute himself and do our reading. Thank you so much, Bernd, for doing that.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. So this is from Douglas Rushkoff's new book called Team Human, which was published last year. He's a prolific writer and thinker around technology and media criticism. And I thought this book is very relevant for humanists, since it does not only ring the warning bells about a future outlook of our current society status quo, but also prescribes encouraging changes within our power as humans. So don't worry, I'm not going to read the whole book, but the book is conveniently broken into 100 micro chapters, each of which takes about 1 minute to read. And I decided to read the first 99. No, just kidding. There's a segment called the introduction, and it has about 7 micro chapters, so it takes about 7 minutes. I timed it, but it's really worthwhile. So I want to read this to you. It stands on its own really well, and the book overall is very, very interesting. So let me pull up my screenshot here. So I will say the number of the micro chapter. So 1, Autonomous technologies, runaway markets, and weaponized media seem to have overturned civil society, paralyzing our ability to think constructively, connect meaningfully, or act purposefully. It feels as if civilization itself were on the brink and that we lack the collective willpower and coordination necessary to address issues of vital importance to the very survival of our species. It does not have to be this way. 2, everyone is asking how we got here, as if this were a random slide toward collective incoherence and disempowerment. It is not. There is a reason for our current predicament, an anti-human agenda embedded in our technology, our markets, and our major cultural institutions, from education and religion to civics and media. It has turned them from forces for human connection and expression into ones of isolation and repression. By unearthing this agenda, we render ourselves capable of transcending its paralyzing effects, reconnecting to one another, and remaking society toward human ends rather than the end of humans. 3, the first step toward reversing our predicament is to recognize that being human is a team sport. We cannot be fully human alone. Anything that brings us together fosters our humanity. Likewise, anything that separates us makes us less human and less able to exercise our individual or collective will. We use our social connections to orient ourselves, to ensure mutual survival, and to derive meaning and purpose. This is not merely a quaint notion, but our biological legacy. People who are disconnected from the organizations or communities they serve often wither without them. We sometimes connect with one another in order to achieve some common goal, such as finding food or evading prey, but we also commune and communicate for our own sake, for their own sake, because we gain strength, pleasure, and purpose as we develop rapport. Are you there? Yes, I hear you. You are not alone. 4, we have amplified and extended our natural ability to connect by inventing various forms of media. Even a one-way medium such as a book creates a new intimacy as it lets us see the world through another person's eyes. Television enables us to bear witness to what is happening to people across the globe and to do so en masse. On TV, we watched together simultaneously events from the moon landing to the felling of the Berlin Wall and experienced our collective humanity as never before. Likewise, the internet connects us more deliberately and in some ways more reassuringly than any medium before it. With its development, the tyranny of top-down broadcast media seemed to be broken by the peer-to-peer connections and free expressions of every human node on the network. The net turned media back into a collective, participatory, and social landscape. But as seemingly happens to each and every new medium, the net went from being a social platform to an isolating one. Instead of forging new relationships between people, our digital technologies came to replace them with something else. We live with a bounty of communication technologies at our disposal. Our culture is composed more of mediated experiences than of directly lived ones. Yet we are also more alone and atomized than ever before. Our most advanced technologies are not enhancing our connectivity, but thwarting it. They are replacing and devaluing our humanity and, in many different ways, undermining our respect for one another and ourselves. Sadly, this has been by design, but that's also why it can be reversed. 5, we're embedding some very old and disparaging notions about human beings and their place in the natural order into our future technological infrastructure. Engineers at our leading tech firms and universities tend to see human beings as the problem and technology as the solution. When they are not developing interfaces to control us, they are building intelligences to replace us. Any of these technologies could be steered toward extending our human capabilities and collective power. Instead, they are deployed in concert with the demands of a marketplace, political sphere, and power structure that depend on human isolation and predictability in order to operate. Social control is based on thwarting social contact and exploiting the resulting disorientation and despair. Human beings evolved by gaining the capacity to forge greater numbers of social connections. The development of our brain, language, text, electronic media, and digital networks were all driven by our need for higher levels of social organization. The net, just the latest of these advances, challenges us with the possibility that thinking and memory may not be personal at all, but group activities. But this potential has been overshadowed by deep suspicion of how human beings might behave as an empowered collective, as well as a growing awareness that socially fulfilled people need less money, experience less shame, and behave less predictably and act more autonomously. thinking, feeling connected people undermine the institutions that would control them. They always have. That's why new mechanisms for forging bonds and cooperation between people are almost inevitably turned against those ends. Language that could inform is instead used to lie. Money that could promote trade is instead hoarded by the wealthy. Education that could expand workers' minds is instead used to make them more efficient human resources. All along the way, cynical views of humans as mindless mob, incapable of behaving intelligently and peacefully, are used to justify keeping us apart and denying us roles as autonomous actors in any of these areas of life. Our institutions and technologies aren't designed to extend our human nature, but to mitigate or repress it. Once our humanity is seen as a liability instead of a strength, the corresponding cultural drive and spiritual quest is to transcend our personhood, a journey out of body, away from our humanness, beyond matter and into whatever substrate, be it ether, electrical wavelength, virtual reality, or AI, we fetishize at the moment. 6. Digital networks are just the latest media to go from promoting social bonds to destroying them, from fostering humanity to supplanting it. Our current shift may be more profound and permanent, however, because this time we are empowering our anti-human technologies with the ability to retool themselves. Our smart devices iterate and evolve faster than our biology can. We are also tying our markets and our security to the continued growth and expanding capabilities of our machines. This is self-defeating. We're increasingly depending on technologies built with the presumption of human inferiority and expendability. But the unprecedented speed of this latest reversal from social extension to social annihilation also offers an opportunity to understand the process by which it happens. Once we do, we will recognize how it has occurred in a myriad ways throughout history, from agriculture and education to currency and democracy. We humans, in a single generation, are experiencing a turn of the cycle in real time. This is our chance. We can choose not to adapt to it any longer, but to oppose it. 7.
Brent, I think we're going to have to can move to the next, I don't want to take away our speaker's time, but is this
one sentence, literally, one sentence and then it's done. Okay, 7.
Okay.
It's time we reassert the human agenda, and we must do so together, not as the individual players we have been led to imagine ourselves to be, but as the team we actually are, Team Human, the end.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted, but that was very well done. Thank you so much. And I think as we become more connected to the internet through meetings like this, we've got to keep the things that you just said in mind. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'd like to take a moment now to introduce Joyce Leckie, who is a member of the program committee, who will be introducing our speaker. We'll be taking questions at the end, and I'll be able to explain to you how to get a question in at the end of the presentation. Joyce?
Good morning. Can you hear me all right? I'm unmuted? Okay. Harsh Arora is one of our own, a humanist of Greater Portland, but in his case, a humanist with a deep knowledge of Hindu culture. Born and reared in India, he obtained his engineering degree at IIT Delhi, then migrated to the US for graduate studies at UC Berkeley. He was managing director at HSBC Bank before retiring. During the last 10 years, he has written, directed, and acted in several plays based on Indian history and mythology. He frequently lectures on Hinduism and Indian culture at schools, universities, churches, and other institutions. Mr. Arora has written 3 books. The first, Hindi, Undesired Duty, and Mahalila, a book of plays in Hindi. A marathon runner, Harsh is married and the father of 2 sons, a nephrologist in Seattle and a political science professor at Wellesley College in Massachusetts. According to Harsh, Hindu culture, or dharm, or right way of living, are eternal, will always exist with or without gods and divinity. To give him the opportunity to explain that statement, we welcome Harsh Arora.
Can you see the screen and you can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Joyce, for those kind words. I want to tell you up front that I didn't go to any seminary or any school to learn about religion or Hinduism, all I needed to learn, I could learn from my parents. On the left, you can see my mother believed in idol worship, and she had an alcove like this, you see on the left side, and she spent about an hour every day, all the time I knew her. My father didn't believe in idol worship. He believed in fire worship. In some areas, the two will be considered so different that they'll be fighting. But my parents lived for, I think they were married for 63 years before my father passed away. And as an innocent, young boy, it made me think that if one of them is right, then other one has to be wrong, and vice versa. So with that thought, my education, my education on religion started. I started thinking about Hinduism, reading books, not only about Hinduism, but other cultures also. And for Hinduism, what came out to me basically was three recurring themes in the Indian history as I learned about it. One was there was a diverse expression all along for centuries and millennia. There were multiple ideologies, and the stress was more on seeking rather than faith or believing. With that, I'm going to just go a little bit theoretical up front, put together a groundwork, just to differentiate between what the religion is, the Western concept of religion, where the adherents are brought together with belief or some rituals, etc. In Hindu religion or Hindu culture, we call it dharm. Dharm is the word that we use, which, as I studied it all along, it's changed its meaning, but mostly the meaning meant was it is a balance between free will of an individual and his responsibility to the society. And if I can give an example, it's like, I have a free will. I have a car, I can drive anywhere I want. But to be responsible to the society, I must drive on the right side and stop when there's a stop sign there or a red light and wait for the green light to come on. That essentially was what dharma meant all along for Hindus in India. What brings Hindus together is one God or ideology, and not one God or ideology, but the choices it offers. And I'll talk about those choices that it offers. The most important book for a Hindu is the Bhagavad Gita. And so in other words, when a Hindu goes to a court to take an oath, he takes it on Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita, I want to just give very high level view on Bhagavad Gita. It's a book which is part of a larger book called Mahabharata. The context is that it's about a battle between two cousins. And at the beginning of the battle, one of the warriors, the warrior king, kind of gives up. He has second thoughts about fighting, and it so happens that his charioteer is God. Now he tells the charioteer that, hey, I don't want to fight. And God, the charioteer, insists that no, it's your duty to fight. And the whole book, is about that conversation or discussion between God and the warrior. And there are 18 chapters. It's a fairly sizable book. And if you were to read it, it'll take probably 3 hours to do. So the point I'm making is that, he did not accept what God said. He argued with him, and he agreed to what he said only after a long discussion. Now you compare that to a Genesis story where Abraham is asked by God to kill his son, Isaac. Now he doesn't ask any question, no discussion. He, without even telling Isaac's mother, he takes him to the top of the hill and ties him up and is ready to kill him with a sword. And that's when God intervenes, and the story everybody knows. So in one words, I would say that Hindus have been very argumentative. So never argue with me. I'll always have, counter arguments before I accept anything. And that's been the nature of Hindus. Another thing, a little theoretical, I want to bring it is from a little book called Truth in Religion by Mortimer Adler. He gives an idea of this spectrum of truth. On one side, left side, you can see the objective truth. We all know objective truth comes from experimental sciences, where you do an experiment, you get observations. Only if it is repeatable, only if it is reviewed by others, it becomes a real truth, right? I think the monotheistic religions is closer to that. They think that what happened really happened, and so it is. On the other end of the truth, according to Adler, is he uses the analogy of a taste. So the most subjective truth is our taste, and oftentimes we can't describe what the taste is, but I just like it, and I follow that, and I eat that food, and in a similar way, if I like a ideology or anything, I follow that. And I don't care if it is objective or no, if other people like it or no. And, Hindu seeker or Hindu adherents are closer to that subjective truth. And that's why I think that the people with objective truth, you need objective truth for unity. If you want to do a project, everybody should be on the same path. While for plurality, everybody can have their own say, or everybody can have their own view and follow that. And there's been much less fight. If you like cheese and I like tofu, we don't need to fight. We can just follow what we like and continue our life. So with that background, I want to just compare very high level, between, so on the left side, you see Abrahamic religions, all monotheistic, and all of them originated in desert, Middle East. And on the right is dharmic. The dharm is the word we use in India. And so I call it dharmic religions. And these four religions, Hindu, Buddhism, Jain, and Sikhism, all originated in India. And there's a very high level difference between the two sides, as the desert has, low resources, and to get high resources, what people have to come together, unify, and to grab as much resources they can. And therefore, I think monotheistic religions came about. In India, India has very fertile land. I call it a forest. There was a lot of food to eat. So there was never that contention or need for unity to get any resources, and therefore the pluralistic society prevailed. Then we all know, Abrahamic religion are based on a revelation, but dharmic religions are more about realization, and mostly I'll talk about self-realization. The Abrahamic religion, there's a linear time, you come from origin to judgment day. In dharmic religions, there is a cyclical time, and reincarnation is the predominant belief. Abrahamic is based on history. One thing happened, and the religion evolved from there. And on the dharmic side, they call it eternal. It's always been there. It'll always be there, and we'll talk about that as I proceed. In Abrahamic religion, some people think it's they are the chosen people by the God. And as I've said, on dharmic religion is the choice, individual choice. I make the choice of what I want to believe in or what I want to seek, what the truth is for me. Left, on Abrahamic, it's the God grace, original sin. Dharmic people don't believe in that. They think we are not sinners, but we are divine. Each individual is a divine, and if we go deeper and deeper into us, we can see the divinity in each one of us. Abrahamic, God and Satan are separate, but in dharmic, good and bad are, this non-duality is at the heart of dharmic religions. It's kind of similar to yin and yang that the Chinese people talk about. On the Abrahamic side, it's more external orientation, and a lot of good work has been done, a lot of inventions, a lot of technical developments have been done in the West. But when you come to dharmic or India, I think they have done probably as much for inner engineering as the West has done for external engineering. In Abrahamic, we have a lot of, this word tolerance is used a lot and with pride, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But on the dharmic side, it's more mutual acceptance, and I'll define the two. So the point I'm making here is that the monotheistic, most religions can be monotheistic, but we live in a pluralistic society. So I think the world can learn a lot from Hindu culture, how to live in a pluralistic society that we do now. So here's a map of India. And it's actually a map of India, a 1,000-year-old map. So just Hindu name have more of a geographic identity. All the way on the left of the map, there is a river called Sindhu, if you can see the word Sindhu there. At the time, this is a few thousand years ago, this is the mark between Persia on the left or the west and India on the right. And at that time, there was Zoroastrian religion on the left, in the Persia. And they have a defined life. They have Ahura Mazda, one god, and they followed similar rituals and all that. But they found that the people on the right side of the river, you don't know what they do. Everybody has different way of thinking about truth and all that. And they didn't know what to call them, and Indians didn't know what to call themselves. So they started calling them by, Sindhu. They call them, oh, these are the Sindhus who live, and they pronounce S as H, and therefore the word Hindu came. I mean, the word Hindu is not mentioned in any Hindu scripture. It's all, it's only in their Zoroastrian scripture you can find the word Hindu. So it's not based on any ideology. It's basically a geographic identity. And at that time, I have these list of countries on the left, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and all that. All these were, with the asterisk, were all pretty much Hindu, and the Hindu culture was also in Cambodia, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And some of them may have changed their religion, but the culturally, Indonesia is more or less Muslim, but they still have a lot of Hindu culture in them. But overall, in 1200 years, about 40% of Hindus have converted. And we'll talk about it, why they have converted as we go on. But most Hindus in the world live still in India. About 90%, more than 90% live in India. Just, oftentimes people think Hinduism is the oldest religion, but the word Hinduism is only 200 years old when the Britishers named it that. And, and that name has still stuck on. So, as I was talking about tolerance and acceptance, if you go deeper into the word tolerance, what does tolerance mean? I'm in the right, you're in the wrong, but I magnanimously indulge you in your right to be wrong. I think that's what some people say when they say, I'm tolerant. I mean, if I say to my spouse that I'm tolerant of you, she may think I'm insulting her, So acceptance on the other side, and that's what I learned from my parents and so many others that I was brought up with, is the mutual acceptance. And the way I defined it was, I know my truth, you know your truth, I respect your truth for you, please respect my truth for me, because there is no universal truth. And that is the basis for that culture that's stayed for a long time. I have a little quote from my favorite philosopher who lived a long time ago, that all that's out there gets filtered through our senses before it becomes an understanding. How can we ever know an external God? And his, actually Shankar's philosophy, if you read more, is very close to Immanuel Kant. Kant said about the same thing. We are the basic language in India. Ancient language was Sanskrit, and 1,000 years ago, if you go to a dictionary, if you were to go to a dictionary, you won't find a word for belief, because it was all about seeking. And with time, of course, things have changed. Every Hindu is not a seeker, and there are a lot of believers. And we'll talk as we go on to history. We'll talk about that. But originally, there was no word for belief in Sanskrit. So with this premise, Hindus flourished for centuries, and let's see what happened after that. So, this quote from Karl Popper about tolerance: if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerance, then tolerance will be destroyed and tolerance with them. And that, to a large extent, applied to India and to Hindus. Starting from 8th century, as you know, India was fairly rich at that time, and people started coming from outside in looking for some wealth. And I'm not going to go through the names, but you see that from 8th century onwards till 1947, India was pretty much, here and there under foreign rule, mostly first initially for 800 years under the Muslim rule, and then the British came for a couple of hundred years. And the first Hindi word, Indian or Sanskrit word that got into the English dictionary was loot, because that's how much British looted India. And there are, it's billions of dollars were taken out. So let's go. This is the chart. I'm just giving you an overview on from 180 to 1000 AD. India's GDP was highest in the world, 40%. And from 1000, it started to shrink as the outsiders came, or for whatever reason, and it's started to go down, 1700. And then after 1800, it dramatically went down as the British came. And because, Muslims came not really for wealth, but British came to India to basically get the wealth. They were after the wealth, and they took that a lot out. And so with time, even now, they haven't recovered much in the last 70 years of independence. So I call Hindu culture, religion, an open system of joyful confusion without conclusions. So you make your own conclusions. There is a confusion. If you ask Hindus, they will say, oh, this religion is convoluted. We don't know what I'm supposed to do. So there's a lot of confusion out there. Because it's basically, it's up to you to figure out what you want. There is no central body. There is no Rome to tell you what to believe in, what not to believe in. You're on your own, basically. And there are some gurus out there who will do it for, maybe they'll take money in return, but there's a lot of that going on. There are no sects, no traditions, but belief. I've highlighted belief because I talked about seekers, but now with time, as we learned from our rulers, there are a lot of believers. There's who would believe but you could believe in anything or nothing and still be a practicing Hindu. So there is nothing against that you've got to believe in certain thing. Is still now. It is referred to as Sanatan Dharma. Sanatan is basically means eternal, and that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more as we go on. Is why is it? What makes it eternal? And why? Now, one reason, Hinduism has also been going down. Number of Hindus, as we see, 40% have converted out, mostly to Muslim religion, some to Buddhist religion. There is no concept there, because it's geographic identity. So if anybody can do anything, what's the point of what does conversion mean? Nobody knew what conversion means. Lately, there is some people are trying to find a way to convert people into Hinduism, but pretty much it's almost negligible. Numbers are negligible. I don't know how many of you have read A Story of Civilization by Will Durant. It's a great book. In the it's I think 6 to 10 volumes. It's a very long, large book. He died in 1980, I think, and the first volume he has on India, and this quote is from him, and I'm going to read that. Perhaps in return for conquest, arrogance, and spoliation, Hinduism will teach us the tolerance and gentleness of the mature mind, the quiet content of the unacquisitive soul, the calm of understanding spirit, and a unifying, pacifying love for all living things. That was his view. And if you read that, the whole part, which I have read in his book, he has a lot of things to say about India. Now, as I said, there are a lot of paths, and some of them you've heard of. And an individual is free to take any path. But it is said that every path leads to the same thing called moksha. Moksha is the word that is used, which is ultimate objective of practicing Hindu. And what does that mean? Moksha, to me, and it's strange that you can, it's also very vague and confusing. So you find your own meaning. And to me, the moksha meaning is to know yourself. I mean, as I've written at the bottom, humans therefore have access to the source of creation, which is within us. So as we go down into us, we can know all about the universe. I'm going to go very quickly into each paths. Some of you know Raj Yoga is Raj means royal. It's at the top, and it pretty much means the meditation, the word meditation that we use. Gyan is for wisdom, and that's based on the, if you see Islam, it has a couple of books, Quran and Hadith maybe. Christianity has a dozen books, but Hinduism has a library of scriptures, and often contradictory. But most of it is either experiences of people, or people mostly learn from fiction. And there are a lot of scriptures with stories, and I'm going to go through that later on very quickly. Then we have the Karma Yoga, which is the attitude of selfless action. You have Bhakti Yoga, which is devotion, which is the most popular today, and I may highlight it a little bit later on that also. There's a jap mantra. People may have heard, that you go to a guru, he gives you a mantra, and if you repeat it, you get salvation, or you get moksha. Then you have Tantra, which is also pretty popular, getting popular in the US. And then the final one, Hatha Yoga, is actually the most popular, because if you go to a gym and you say yoga, you're doing Hatha Yoga, which is one of the 7. So there are other yogas that you could do. Now, this is the, we don't have to go into the names, but these are some of the major, you can call it deities, you can call it goddesses, that are most important for people who believe in or follow the devotion of yoga. And there was time that, it wasn't about belief, because you had to, the word for belief, which is vishwas in Sanskrit, basically meant that you need to know somebody very well to have reference for them. For example, if you are a student, you want to revere wisdom. So you can, I don't know if my cursor works, but Saraswati is supposed to be the goddess of wisdom. So you revere that. But when you, start working, and let's say you have a business and you care about wealth, then you go for Lakshmi, who is the goddess responsible for wealth, and hopefully you'll get it. So there, and so on and so forth. So the idea in this also devotion was to know yourself, know your problem, and then try to find a solution in a deity instead of going to single God for all your problems. So that's a distinction that I can make. And if you see, look around, I mean, nothing is really created in the world. You put a seed in a soil and a tree grows. You put a sperm in a woman's womb, a kid grows. Humans are the only ones who create. And in India, that it was, if you don't like any of these gods, create your own. Doesn't matter. I mean, that's how it worked. That it's the humans that create gods, and not the god creates humans. I mean, that was the thought. And there's a very interesting ritual that they have in some parts of India where they spend sometime months to create a idol of a god, and particularly Ganesh. And then they worship him for a week, and then they immerse the idol in the water. So in other words, you create a god every year, a new god every year, and you destroy them at the end of the worship period. And that still goes on, in a big way in some parts of the country. This is just very high level view of the scripture. There are lots of them. There are Vedas are the oldest, and they have, within that, there are hundreds of books, Upanishads, at least 108 Upanishads, and most of them are either talk about some cosmology, and otherwise mostly it's experiences of advanced seekers. They tell you, they give you idea what to seek, and you may follow or you'll not follow. Then we have, and later mostly what people are familiar with are these stories, two epics. One is Ramayana, which is fairly similar to Odyssey, and I think composed around the same time than Homer, 700 BC, I think, when Homer wrote Odyssey, Valmiki compiled Ramayana, and then Mahabharata is another epic which is quite similar to Iliad, but it's huge. It's 10 times the size of Iliad and Odyssey combined. Huge book. Then there are a lot of stories about goddesses, Purans, and you can take a pick what you believe in, what you want to know, and that's what you can follow. Oftentimes questions come on caste system. India is known for its caste system, and yes, it's been there, and it started as a caste by vocation, but with time, because we didn't have schools, a boy could only learn a trade from his father, and it became part of the they included not only vocation, but also the birth. So you had caste by birth. So both existed for a long time, but there was quite a bit of interchange between them. There was respect for each other's work. But what happened in beginning of 20th century, when British were ruling India, this guy, I don't know how many of you have heard about scientific racism, but it was a big thing. It was considered science that you could, by looking at somebody or by the physical traits of somebody, you could say what their background is. And this guy, Herbert Risley, who was head of census in India in 1901, actually. He did a lot of studies on tribes and castes in India. And he tried to show that caste members had distinguishing physical features, which nobody thought about before. And he then introduced the hierarchy of the 4 castes in India. So even though castes were there, there was no real hierarchy till then. It became very real because everybody believed in scientific racism. And since then, it's no longer considered scientific, and all that was basically hotshot, But native Indians, because, British were ruling, they followed it. And still less educated and villagers follow the caste system. But overall, it is illegal in India to discriminate anybody based on caste. I hope that answers some of the questions on caste that people have. As these days, there are a lot of stories coming out for India, how Hindu nationalism and all that. And I just want to give you some idea of how secular India has been. India is the only country that has been subsidizing Hajj travel for Muslims for years, since independence in 1947, for at least 70 years. So they've spent billions of dollars. Each in 2008, I know the number, each Muslim used to get $1,000 to go to Saudi Arabia for Hajj. Hindus got not a penny, okay? Hindus have never gotten a penny for any kind of pilgrimage, but Muslims used to get. This ended last year. And that's why some people don't like the current government. How can you end it? You got to keep giving something. Anyway, India allows Muslims to proclaim 5 times a day on public loudspeakers, there is no God but Allah. I go to India often, and there's a mosque near my brother, and I'm woken up every day at 6 o'clock from the loudspeakers. That, in a country where only 15% of the people are Muslims, but you got to wake up to that. So India has had a Sikh prime minister for 10 years. Only 1.7% of Indians are Sikhs. They've had a Christian head of ruling party. Only 2.3% Indians are Christians. They had 2 Muslim presidents. 14.2% Indians are Muslims. And current president is a scheduled caste, lowest caste Hindu. When Muslims invaded Iran to avoid persecution, Zoroastrians emigrated to settle in India. Only Zoroastrians found in India are in the world are mostly, they live in India now. And they're doing very well. They came, I think about 1200 years ago, or maybe 1100 years ago. And they've lived happily, and if you see their per capita income, per capita education is highest in India. When China took over Tibet, Dalai Lama came and settled in India with thousands of fellow Buddhists, and they are still living. They in one city. They've made it their city now. Very quickly, I'll go through just to give you an idea. This is the largest Hindu temple in the world, in Cambodia. It's not in India, it's in Cambodia. And it's a Vishnu temple built in 12th century and still there, but the country is Buddhist, but they have a Hindu temple, the largest Hindu temple in the world. This is the largest Hindu temple in India, in South India, which was built in 6th century BCE, plundered in 1311, but rebuilt in 1378, and still it's a functional Hindu temple. This is the largest Hindu temple in the United States. It's 2.5 million square feet, huge. There are about 450 Hindu temples in India. This is the largest in New Jersey. I want to give you an idea of kind of temples. It gives more idea about the culture than the religion. This is a place called Khajuraho in middle India. There were about 70 such temples built 1,000 years ago. And what is very interesting, I found, is that, so this is, you can see it from a distance here, but when you go close, look at the type of sculptures they have outside the temple. So it's almost, or it is actually X-rated, but people were allowed to put such sculptures outside the temples, and they still exist. There were 70 of them. When the Muslims came, they didn't like this at all, and they destroyed whatever they could see. Somehow 3 temples they couldn't reach because they were hidden somehow, and they survived. And now you have to pay money to go in there and see. These are pictures I have taken myself when I was there a few years ago, and they are still there, and a lot of visitors come and visit this area. So let's come to how Hinduism has influenced the West, or more importantly, the United States. John Adams, Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman's library, if you were to go, you will find some Hindu texts, scriptures. Emerson and Thoreau were very much into it. I know, I personally didn't know. I haven't heard what John Adams had about it. But, of all the known philosophers, Schopenhauer was the first one to read the Hindu Upanishads, and his philosophy, and if you read his book, The World as Will and Representation, comes fairly close to the philosophy you can find in Upanishads, Hindu Upanishads. Then, some of the Hindu gurus or teachers or whatever, Vivekananda and Yoganand actually came. Vivekananda came in end of 19th century, and Yoganand came in early 20th century. People came to know about Hinduism more. A normal, ordinary American came to know that Yoganand's autobiography of Yogi has sold 4 million copies in the United States. It was published in the United States, and it's still you can find it in any library, this book. Then after Second World War, a lot of other Indian gurus became popular, particularly Raman Maharishi, Aurobindo, and Prabhupada. Prabhupada is the one who started the Hare Krishna movement, which is still there. Beatles made it very popular in the West, the Hindu meditation process very popular when they went to India and lived for some time to learn. And lately, there are Western people who are going to India, like Alan Watts, Ken Wilber, Eckhart Tolle, Richard Alpert, Ram Dass, who just died 3 months ago. They also made it quite popular, the Hinduism. There was an article in Newsweek, August 2009, called "We Are All Hindu Now," and basically what she is, the Lisa Miller, the editor, was saying there is that, slowly Americans are becoming Hindu. I mean, obviously there are nobody coming to tell them to do this, but what I've done is I've updated some of these numbers, statistics that she has in her article. This article is available. If you Google search, you can read this article. But so 36.7 million Americans practice yoga regularly, and that's the 16 statistics. 65% Americans think there are more than one path to salvation. This is all information is on Google search. You can find it. 26% Americans believe in reincarnation rather than, the judgment day. And 51.6%, over 1 million people in 2017 opted for cremation rather than burial. In UK, it has reached more than 75% Britons prefer cremation rather than burial. And 84% saw God as everywhere and everything as opposed to someone somewhere, and karma has become a common word. So with this premise, Lisa Miller was saying, she was asking the question, are we all becoming Hindus? And you can answer that for yourself. Okay, now I come to the last slide here. So what's because one of the things I want to talk about, the civilization, the eternity of the civilization. And what is the civilization? To me, it's a shared way of life reached by a group of people after a long progressive journey with mutual understanding and dependency. Okay. Now, if you Google search, you find these, Aztec, Incas, Mayan, these are the ancient civilization. And in that, there is one Indus Valley civilization, which was at the border of Iran and India. And with time, they lived around a river, which when it dried up, they moved eastwards and they formed India. And that civilization is what the thought behind it, the ideology of that is still there. And so as there are, different states, right? There are what, about 25 nations who call themselves Christian nations. There are at least 27 nations that call themselves Islamic. But India is more of a civilization state rather than either ethnic or religious. It's the only homeland for Indic community with a promise of equal treatment for all communities that live there. And that's been there for years. So my last, sentence basically is that the qualities that make a civilization, or actually if humanity follows that, humanity eternal, is do not impose one thought on someone else. And that's been practiced in India for generations. Be comfortable with opposing viewpoints and seek personal truth rather than believe blind faith. So that's what I have. And I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was excellent. That's really interesting. I had never really understood Hinduism, and that was a really clear understanding. We will be taking questions from our speaker. If you look on your, you'll see a chat. It looks like a little bubble in a cartoon. And if anyone that has a question, simply put your name, press the chat button and put your name in that chat button, and we'll be able to, I'll take turns and I'll call your name and you can ask a question that way.
Hey, Harsh.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Can you take down your presentation so we can see everyone?
Excuse me? Oh,
Would
and
you take your presentation, please?
so stop share.
Yes.
Stop share.
Okay.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, so if you have a question, okay, I think we're going to need to silence everybody again, and then I'm sorry. Okay, if you have a question, find the chat bubble and press that, and then you will put your name. Just type your name to everyone, and we'll see your name, and it looks like we've got Steve. Steve Kroll. Why don't you start with the first question and unmute yourself? There you go.
I'm unmuted, I hope, yeah.
Yes, you are.
I wonder if you could relate your understanding of humanism to your understanding of Hinduism, and how are they compatible and supportive, and where might there be conflicts?
Harsh, you gotta unmute yourself.
Oh, first I
There you
unmute. Oh, I am unmuted.
Now you are.
Okay. I see a lot of similarities there. Where I think the differences are, if you are a humanist and if you try to impose humanism to other people who are not humanists, then you're not Hindu. As long as you don't impose that, you're closer to what a Hindu is, because everybody has a right to believe or follow the path. But as I defined dharm, I don't see much difference between Hinduism and humanism as I understand it. And I've been a member here and coming to Humanist of Greater Portland for years. I think I joined probably 15 years ago, and I was member for a long time. Then I got into other things, but I joined again. So I respect humanism as much as I respect Hinduism. I would call myself humanist Hindu, though.
Thank you. Jeff Strand had a question. Jeff, can you unmute yourself and ask the question? There you go.
Sure. Yeah, so a lot of the stories that you were talking about, the kind of origin teaching stories, involve war. And so I was wondering, if you respect other views completely in Hinduism, how would there be war?
Good question. I mean, there are always conflicts, and you know, at times, I mean, if you have to read the whole books. Why were there a conflict? So Ramayana, for example, you know, Ram's wife was kidnapped, and he did it to get his wife back, and he had to go into a war to do that. And in the case of Mahabharata, and these are the two big stories, you know, there also it was a woman's honor that was taken away by one set of brothers, and to get that back, they had to fight. And so it had to be a very extreme conditions under which you have a war. Now, obviously, India and Pakistan have been fighting. India, I mean, there were conflicts within India even before the Muslims came, and that was more political. There were lots of small little kingdoms, and they used to have conflict with each other. One kingdom wanted to grow their area over others, or dominate the others, and that's been going on. But what I haven't found is that a fight because of somebody's belief or faith. Okay, that I haven't found in my study of the history of India.
Thank you. Our next question, Peter, Peter Wendell had a similar question. Peter, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah. Harsh, what accounts for the violence between the Muslim community and the rest of India, particularly Hindus, within India? I mean, it's a very large Muslim community, 150 million or something, I think, right?
200 million.
200 million.
Close, yeah, and it's growing quite a bit. So, and that may take an hour of answer.
Give me the Reader's Digest version.
Yeah. So, my view is that, we've all raised kids. Most of us have raised kids. And if you give, as long as you're giving to your kids, they're happy. Okay. But the moment you take something, there's a problem, right? And it's a similar relationship between Hindus and Muslims in India. I'll give you some ideas of what the majority Hindus have given to Muslims after the independence. Okay. Number one, Muslims have their own civil law. Everybody else has common laws like the world has, like secular laws, but they are permitted to have their own law. Only civil, not criminal. They didn't want criminal law because they didn't want hands cut if somebody is found to steal, right? Which is in Quran. Then, Muslim or actually all minorities in India can run their own education systems as well as their religious system on their own. Hindus cannot. Hindus, 18% of the donation, and this is, it's almost ridiculous when I talk about it, how stupid could Hindus be at that time? That 18% of donations or to Hindu major temples goes to the state. State manages all the Hindu temples. Muslims don't. Okay. Now, Muslims were getting thousands of dollars to go to Hajj. That was taken away. When you take away from what you have given, there's a problem, right? Then, around independence, there was a special status given to Kashmir. Okay, they didn't have to. It was as much part of India as any other part of India, but special status was given. I think it was the wrong decision, but it was given. What did it mean? It meant, there were Hindu minority there. The majority was Muslims. And in 1990, thousands of Hindus were killed. And this is also, you should do Google search on all this. This is all available. So one of the things you can do is, massacres in Kashmir. Okay, you do a Google search and you'll see a list of them starting, 1990, a big thousands of, and from Kashmir, 500,000 Hindus were kicked out. This is a country with 80% Hindus. Okay, and because why did they go out? Because otherwise they would be killed. Because thousands were killed. So people say that, we're doing something wrong on Muslims, but about 100,000 of those Hindus are still living outside Kashmir in tents for 30 years. Okay, for 30 years. Because people had a lot of problem. Oh, how could you? Because when the special status of Kashmir was taken away, and one of the ways they did it was they took away all the internet and all the different privileges for a few months. Okay, and even human rights people said, oh, how can you do that? But they didn't see the human rights of Hindus, of 100,000 of them living in tents who have houses in Kashmir. They had houses and they are still there. They own them, but they would never go back there. So, there are so many of the, similarly, I don't know if you heard about this Citizenship Amendment Act, okay, which was based, you must have heard about it. Yes. And there was a lot of riots and all that happened. And, maybe I will encourage you to read that. What is the Citizenship Amendment Act? What it is basically is that, in India, a lot of Hindus who used to live in Pakistan and other Muslim countries where they were persecuted came to India. And what India is doing is, well, they're expediting because they've been living there for a long time. In the US also, we do that. If a Mexican has been living for a long time, you give them citizenship. That's all they are doing, okay? And they have a problem that why aren't we, if they are persecuted in those countries, why aren't we also including Muslims into it? And that was the problem. To give you an idea what kind of persecution, and maybe this also you should Google search, what kind of persecution is going, I'll give you some examples. So let's say you are Hindu, you get married in Pakistan, okay? And you have a Hindu ritual marriage, normal. And after, a week, somebody kidnaps your wife, right? And you go to the police. You say, well, I got married a week ago and somebody kidnapped my wife. I kind of know who is, I need help in getting my wife back. You say, how did you get married? Oh, I got married a Hindu way. Oh, that's not valid in Pakistan. Can you imagine for 70 years after independence, Hindu marriage was not valid there? So what do you do when you are a Hindu in Pakistan? You try to come to, the only homeland they know is India. So they come to India. And India should not, so what they are saying is Pakistan, no problem, they can continue persecution, but India should also include Muslims to bring into India, give them citizenship. And that was there, so read about that, what the amendment is. It's a 3-letter and it's available online. But there were thousands of people who were against it. So there are a lot of such similar cases for which they have been conflict. There have been a lot of conflicts. I agree.
Thank you. Joyce has a question. Joyce? Got to unmute. There you go.
There we are. In a way, I think, Harsh, you may have answered this or part of this before, but if I don't have a background in Hindu civilization, I'm not familiar with the literature, I'm not familiar with the customs, what if I just decided today, because I like these points of view, that I am Hindu? May I just declare that, or what would be missing?
Well, a classic old Hindu, strict Hindu will say, unless you are born a Hindu, you can't be a Hindu. Okay. So there is no concept of real conversion, but some people do convert, like Hare Krishna people. They're mostly white guys, right? You see, and they call themselves Hindu. So in a strict sense, you can't call yourself Hindu, but you can. You don't have to call yourself Hindu. You just follow some of the traits of Hindu. There are some good traits in Muslim religion, some good in Christianity, everything. We can take mix good stuff from everywhere.
I can just live
like in India.
Live. Mike Burchett has a question.
Unmute yourself, Mike.
Oh, just a second here.
There you go.
You got it. You got it.
Okay. Yeah, I was reaching for myself. By the way, it's pronounced Burchett, Helen.
Sorry, I do that to you all the time. I'm sorry, Michael.
Okay, I didn't miss anything earlier in the discussion, but are there Hindu fundamentalists similar to fundamentalists in the Abrahamic religions that get, some that get easily offended by anything that is not,
Yeah, I'm sure in over 1 billion Hindus, there are some definitely. And there was the history in North India, lot of Hindus think, and I think part of it's true, that lot of, so there are, if you go to North India, there are no big temples. South India, there are a lot of temples. And they were all mostly broken by the Muslim invaders, okay, the North. So there was a time, it was in 1990s, that some people decided to break one mosque, okay, in India. And I would call that a fundamentalist view that, okay, Muslims destroyed temples, but you can't go back and you can't penalize the Muslims now for that. And I personally would be against that, but they went and actually broke that mosque, and that became a big thing. So I would call that a fundamentalist act to some extent, even though it was proven there archaeologically that under that mosque used to be a Hindu temple. Okay, that temple, that mosque was in the birthplace of Ram, the most important deity of Hindus. Okay, but still, I still think that they shouldn't have broken the mosque, but they did, and so there are definitely people who are fundamentalist.
And this will be, thank you so much. This will be our last question. Stephen Carl had the last question.
Thank you. You mentioned that Indonesia is part of the Hindu tradition. And I know that Indonesians also have a very large Muslim population. Are there the similar problems between Hindus and Muslims in Indonesia that we've been speaking about in India and Pakistan?
Well, in Indonesia, most of the Hindus live in one island, Bali. And I'm not very familiar with that, but if you see an Indonesian dollar or their currency, they have an icon of Ganesh. He is a very important Hindu god on it. Okay, even though I think 80% of the people, 90% are Muslims there. And their airline is called Garud, which is a Sanskrit word for a flying, bird. If you go to their Jakarta, in front of their main, parliament, they have I talked about Bhagavad Gita and this discussion between, warrior and God, that they have a huge sculpture of that right in front of their parliament, even though in that area, everybody is Muslim. So they have kept their Hindu culture. They play, I mentioned Ramayana. I mean, they play Ramayana. It's their version of Ramayana, but it's basically the similar story. But I don't know how much conflict there is. I really don't know.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Harsh. We're applauding here to you. It was a wonderful.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
It gave me a lot to think about in that that idea of tolerance and acceptance, and that acceptance is really different. And I look at my own attitudes when I walk by some. They're not wearing a mask, or they're not so 6 feet apart, and being a little bit more accepting that they may have something else going on, rather than tisking and being the grumpy old lady that wags her finger. So
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. Did you have a question? No, but anyway, we do have some announcements, and
I do have one more question.
Oh, sure, go ahead,
Sorry,
Peter.
I muted myself accidentally.
Yeah.
Harsh, is there a difference in obligation between the Muslim community and Hindu community for military service?
No, there are Muslims are there in the army. There is no, it's not mandatory. So it's all voluntary admission into army. There are many Muslims in the army. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.